right, dude. I'm sorry about that. A long day at work. But thanks for reminding me. So, Jane Austen wrote Roundhand, but not like the Bickham book, like you see. It was something a lot more easier to write. There's not as much shading, but the forms are basically similar. And if you want to just do a search for Jane Austen letters on Google, you can find out what that looked like. Then in this country, there was an attempt to duplicate the writing master's writing, and the people that did that were people like Matlack, who did the Declaration of Independence, the engrosser. And so they used also feather quills at the time, but it was an imitation and was written by an engrosser. So hence the term engrosser script was used. And also jewelers that would want to engrave, watches, would use a similar form of script to engrave on their jewelry. And then the name engraver script was used because the engraver was using it. It's not as big a difference as you think, but the fundamental difference is that it's not engrosser script, and engraver script is not handwriting. You write slowly with just the way a broad pen person would write text letter, ductus, strokes. It's not this. If you watch somebody who can really do handwriting, they write very freely. It's not what I do, which real slow finger forms. And so it's not, the modern form is not handwriting. It's just, Lily used to say it's like engraving on paper. And there are some folks who still do the English roundhand version, whether or not it's true writing or not, it's hard to say. But it's beautiful. Folks like Paul Antonio from England. There's a few others, a gentleman in Vietnam who does amazing roundhand. It's not something that interests me because of the script I fell in love with. But what you see in my book is engrosser script. And there's even different forms of that. My engrosser script is more based on Zenarian College and Lupfer. And whereas there are people who emulate the great Louis Mataraz's engrosser script. And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Handwriting, calligraphy, whatever. I know people that get upset that I even use the term copper plate for what I do, but it's because people don't really know the terminology. I don't want people to get afraid. Sometimes people would come up to me during seminars, and we could see fear that they were about to ask me something I might get upset about. It's just writing. There's nothing to get upset about. I can tell you the historical differences, and I try to write articles on that and publish it in my book. But it's nothing to get fearful over. It's just ink on paper, and there is a history to it. Some people, right now, we use the word copper plate for almost everything. But I'm not the handwriting police. Call it what you want. Read my articles or my book, and you should know the difference at that point. I've shown images, and they look very different. But what confuses people is sometimes in the past, people used to take ornamental capitals with engraver script lowercase, or Spencerian capitals, or let's say engraver script or engrosser script capitals with Spencerian lowercase, and people get confused. What do you call it? It's sort of like what happens with music today, where people don't know what to categorize it. Is it R&B? Is it rock? It's a similar type of, I guess, phenomenon, for lack of a better word. But yeah, read the beginning section of my book, and it should point things out. And I think I have some illustration to help you see the difference as well. Spencerian is very delicate. Engrosser script is more heavily shaded. Ornamental penmanship is like artistic form of Spencerian, lots of swirls and curls. But one of the things you do see today is people sometimes focus on the swirls and curls and forget about the importance of the letter form. So you wind up with mediocre letters with lots of swirls, or what I call spaghetti around it. And you can actually overdo that. I'm not a fan of flourishing like that. What else do we have?
And do you see where Nancy wrote you a little message there? Can you see that?
Couldn't hear you, Liz.
Nancy wrote you a message there. Can you see hers?
This is my fan of vintage fountain pens. You talking about that one?
Yeah, she said thank you. Yeah.
Oh.
She wrote, thank you, that she's a
Oh.
fan of vintage pens,
Yeah,
and
great.
I'm amazed about the quality of the pens. Almost being
Well, yeah, back then they used materials like celluloid, which is rarer to find today. I see some things written here in Spanish. Is there anybody who wants to read them and let me know what they say?
from Jorge.
There's one by Jorge Gomez to everyone. The very last one. Oh, I
Yeah,
see it
she
now.
wrote,
Okay. Gotcha. Oh, that was the first question where we talked about certification of the Society of Nyampeth. Like I said, I don't have much input. I'm sorry. I was very involved in the beginning with that whole thing, but no more. I just have not been. I'm still their historian, but I don't really know much about what's happening with the certification and different levels of writing. So I'm sorry I can't help you there. I don't even know who's running it, to be honest with you. What else do we have? If anybody just wants to ask a question out loud, please go ahead. There's so many different things that people usually have questions about. For those in calligraphy, what about inks? What about paper? What about the pen holders? I think you know that I have my own pen holder I designed, but it wasn't the first one I helped work on. Paper and Ink Art sells one called I guess the fully adjustable oblique that I helped them design. Just because it's such a mysterious thing to people, they don't know how to use it, and so a lot of them will stop trying to learn script in the copper plate style because they can't figure out the holder. So I wanted to produce something that was pretty much okay right out of the box, so to speak. And Chris was very helpful. Chris Yoke was very helpful with that. But they're not inexpensive. When I came into this, it was unheard of to spend even $40 US for a pen holder. Now people are selling them for hundreds of dollars. But I want to make it accessible to folks. But even so, I don't think, I forget what he sells my pen holder for. And so, I don't make any profit from that. I take no money for that. But I think I want to say it's about the $110 mark, but I could be wrong, which is by no means cheap. And it's not $600, which I do have pen holders at $600. Let's see what else. Inks. The ink you're going to put into a fountain pen can work with most dip pens. The difference is you don't want to put a lot of dip pen inks into fountain pens. People talk about something called iron gall ink. Iron gall ink has been around since Roman times, and it's made with tannic acid from oak galls. There's a wasp that lays its eggs under oak tree barks, and that creates these little almost tumors, but they're very heavily saturated with tannic acid. And so people would crush them in water and then add iron sulfate to that and mix it up. And it has to be in a very acidic solution. Usually it is because the tannic acid is acidic. And when you write with it, if you don't put a dye into it, it's almost invisible until it starts to dry. Then it starts to darken up on the paper. And one of the examples of more common form of that, we blots iron gall ink, which they do sell. But I would never put that into a fountain pen, never. They have formulations they claim should work in fountain pens, but I'm pretty skeptical about some of that stuff. Some people like the shimmery inks, with the particles in them, which is fine if you like it. But if you can't take that pen, the fountain pen, completely apart and clean the nib, I wouldn't use it, because that stuff will never completely come out. And some people may dispute that, but is what I believe. And you probably prove it to yourself too. I like fountain pens that come apart if I have to take them apart. So.
There's one question for Joe.
Excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Excuse me, a question.
Yes.
Which nib do you recommend us for the beginners?
That's a really good question. Are we talking about calligraphy now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're talking about pointed pen, the nibs I used when I was doing this a lot were very soft and flexible, but for beginners, that can be a real problem. They tend to stick in the paper, yeah. And so most people are very comfortable with the larger, stiffer nibs, like the Nico G nib. People will use also the Leonard Principle, which is a lot more flexible. The problem with some of these modern nibs is to find ones that are made correctly. You have to make sure when you split the nib tines apart, they're even and they're cut right down the center. Most of those nibs are off-centered, which are almost unusable. You could find that with vintage pens, but the quality assurance was such that for every box of 144, you might have two that weren't made correctly. Could you use them for something else? Possibly. But for modern nibs, I remember some years ago with John Neal, I bought, I think it was about 50 nibs in a box off him of the Hunt 40, whatever it was, 42B. And I think I found of those nibs, 3/4 of them weren't split correctly. So I called him. I said, Joe, he took them back, but he said, Joe, there's nothing I can do. It's as good as they make them. I think Leonard has a higher degree of maybe quality control, but there's also books I've posted that talk about how they used to make nibs. They used to have these gigantic rooms in England, I believe it was Sheffield, England, where they had workers, like usually women, hand grinding these nibs and inspecting every single one. But if we did that today, you couldn't afford the pen. You just couldn't afford it. So I would say a Nico G, try the Leonard Principle, but also the angle of the pen staff and the angle of the flange is really important. You have to have it can't be too steep and it can't be too low to the paper. And I had images of that. And I had a bunch of different penmen. Let me see if I could find it and pull it up. Angle.
So where we can buy your pen holders here in Mexico?
I know they're made to order usually. The closest I can get you to that would be the one from Paper and Ink Arts. It's called the fully adjustable one. It's less expensive, but Chris Yoke has to make them. When you want them, you let him know. You send him an email, and he will usually make them. I don't know if he's feeling all right now. I'm not sure where he's at with everything, but let me show you the. Have you seen my pen holder?
No.
Okay, and again, this is not a commercial or an advertisement. I've made no money off this. So let me see. It's amazing. I can find these things when I don't need it, when I need to find it quickly, I can't.
That's technology.
Here it is. So what the saying one of my sayings I like to promote is pay it forward. And so no, that's not the one I'm looking for. The flange, it's a very different looking. Here it is. I'll show it to you now. This is the pen holder.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if I was the first one. Chris thinks I was the first. I have no idea if I was the first one to angle this, but I did that for ink, so it doesn't get stuck on there. But they're numbered, and this is maple, sometimes called fiddleback maple or flame maple. But it's because of certain guitars I love the wood on them. That's why. And Chris also is a musician. I don't know how many he sold so far, probably around 50 of them, but they're each individually numbered. And then you can see pay it forward on the top of it, the numbering, and his logo is on here. And this is a really unique flange design that he did not come up with. It was developed by a gentleman named Bullock, Isaac Weldon Bullock, for the Bullock pen holder. And it holds everything, almost any kind of nib you can put in there, it'll hold it. It's pretty amazing. And you basically unscrew the screw to put another one in there and then lock it down so it doesn't move. And it can be adjusted to a certain amount. It can be adjusted. The Bullock was not as easy to adjust. And See if I can find the bullet. There's a plastic holder. Yeah, here it is. So, okay. This is the bullet holder. Can you see that? It's not that large, but I'll see if I can bring it up. Can you see it? Everybody?
Yeah.
Well, there's you can see the flange here. It's that design, except it doesn't slope as the front.
Mhm.
And so this is a vintage pen holder, but very, very, very durable. You know, today we look for real pretty holders like the one I just showed you, but the fact is the masters of the past, they were like just work objects for them. A lot of them had very simple. The most famous of those ornamental pen was Louis Mataraz. We have some of his holders, very basic wood designs, nothing fancy, no fancy wood, no ivory. You know, I have pen holders that have fossilized ivory on them, and but you know, even like with fountain pens, and Liz knows this. You know, I've had some very, very fancy fountain pens, but the ones I use every day are simple sailors. You know, the one I got in my pocket's a Sailor Pro Gear. That's my #1 pen, and it's, I mean, it's expensive for, yeah, but this is not cheap. But compared to some pens, you know, there are people out there that think you spend $50, $50 on a pen. It's ridiculous, versus $3,000. So,
Yeah.
and that's perfectly fine to think that. So, did I answer your question?
Yes, thanks. Thanks a lot.
If I could find the link before we leave, I'll send you the link to the other one for Paper and Ink Arts. Brenda, I don't know who owns it anymore.
In Mexico, you said you told us?
No, it would have to be shipped. I know of no place, and somebody online may know of a place in Mexico, but I don't know of anything in Mexico. I'm sorry. They will
But
ship to Mexico.
if we are going to travel to the States, so we can you send us a link to order it?
Yes, well, I'm going to do that right now, as long as I can find it. You know, and there shouldn't be much import tax on something like this. This is they don't need to really insure it for much. The one I'm going to show you is the fully I think it's fully adjustable. It's a very simple design. It also comes left-handed too, but for lefties, it depends on how you write, if you write with a hook or not. So I will go ahead and put the link in the chat section.
Yes, please.
I just put it there, and I will share the my screen with you. This is, you can see the beginnings of the pen holder that's got my name on it, but see how the angle is, the front of this is angled. So can everybody see that?
Yeah.
That's the slope foot, and there's the bullock style holder. The reason why this came about is the person who used to own this company, Brenda Broadbent, asked me to help with the guy who made the other holder she was selling. But I couldn't make him understand why certain things were important. He didn't take me seriously. And I don't know if a different, the guy who finally she switched over to make this holder was a person who made, you know, violin bows and cello bows, the bows that they use. He was a master bow maker for people that were like concert level. So he understood, you know, for lack of a better word, prima donnas. He understood somebody who had very exacting needs, was not going to sit there and say, well, it doesn't matter. So he listened to me, and that's how this was developed. And so, but this is at a $50 price point. And so I don't know if I guess they're in stock.
That's a good price.
Yes, it is. The other one, I don't know exactly what Chris is selling it for, but you got to remember they're made, each is individually handmade. They're slightly different occasionally. They're hand painted. You know, these are handmade too, but not at the same level of wood and all that. But the quality is undeniable. I still have one, I think, somewhere. I do have.
I just bought a pen holder from John Neal. It was too heavy. It was too heavy.
All right.
And I want to ask you if it's light. Your pen holder is light.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be light. Yeah, you know, I've the one he makes. I have I have the prototype he made for me, and he put a little end finial with fossilized ivory on there. But for me, it's light. Yeah. What
Okay.
size? You know which one you got from John?
It's the one that has a marble in the middle. In the middle, I can well, I can show it
You
to
say
you.
marble?
Yeah, not the marble. Well, it's it's like that. It says this.
Hold on. Let me take this out of here. Stop
It's
sharing. Again. Show it to me again. Oh
yeah.
yeah, it's
Can
probably, chances are it's probably that. The
yeah.
other section.
It's too heavy. I think it's because this part,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like a stone. I don't know.
It's fancy, and but if it's too much, no, this, I don't think that the one I have would be, or that one I showed you would be anywhere near that weight.
Okay.
You know, and the same thing happens to fountain pens. I just by the way, Liz, I finally sent Tony that Damascus steel pen. I sent it to him
Mhm.
because yes, I sent that to him, and he couldn't believe how heavy it was. I had a fountain pen made out of Damascus steel. You could kill somebody with it. That's how heavy it was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, but if it
Yeah.
inhibits, if that inhibits your flow and you need to change, and I imagine that was a little more than $50 USD, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It
That's all right.
it
Yeah.
was 50. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The so yeah, it's really important, but the angle of that pen is really important, the flange, and it depends upon how you grip the pen. Pen, let me see, pen grips. Normally when I do this, is anybody here left-handed? Just out of curiosity. Huh.
¿Alguien de aquí es zurdo? Preguntó Joe.
What's that?
I was translating to the people.
Oh, well,
I was asking if anyone here is hand. Okay.
yeah, because what I did is I also made an image, because I get so many questions and I can't really help left-handers. I'm right-handed, so but I made an image of some of the best penmen that are left-handed, how they hold a pen. And you know, for instance, forget Rosemary on top. She has one of the oddest pen holders I've ever seen. But John DeColobus is one of the finest penmen alive. And John writes with an oblique pen holder that's for a right-hander, but he uses his left hand. And he doesn't write over the, people sometimes write with a hook. You know, the hand is like this. He doesn't. This is a buddy of mine, Rick Muffler, who was a White House calligrapher for many years. He's gone now. He passed away some time ago from cancer. Rick basically also writes with a oblique pen holder, but more of a straight grip. And this is Debbie Zeinert. I don't know. I think she's going to be president again of IAMPIT, but Debbie writes with a straight pen holder. Paul Antonio from England, who I mentioned before, Paul writes with a straight pen holder. You know, copper plate, or in the original form, round hand, was not done with an oblique pen holder, nor was Spencerian. People think Spencerian was developed. That wasn't. Platt Roger Spencer Sr. wrote with a quill, a feather quill. He preferred the feather quill, but he wrote with a sharp pointed quill, which had to be constantly trimmed. Whereas Bickham and the English writing masters did not. They wrote with a narrow broad edge, and because he talks about that in one of his publications, The Accountant's Handbook, how to cut the quill. If you haven't written with the quill, I strongly advise you to try it and do it. It's really, really a different experience. You can't use any pressure. It's just very light touch. What else?
I have a question in the chat here. It says in Mexico, the art of calligraphy is getting lost. How do you think we could introduce our people?
You know, it's like with everything else, probably is with get children interested. Most of them are pretty interested in pretty writing. You know, they want to see stuff, how it's written, and you know, they get their interest. But some of this stuff requires a certain level of hand-eye coordination and skill that can be lost. I mean, in the early development of a human being, that, you know, handwriting is important. It helps make certain connections in the brain. This has been shown scientifically. And if you don't let a kid do it, you know, I'm not sure how it'll ever happen in the future. But it is a shame. In this country, there's really, you know, I'm assuming it's like that in Mexico from what I'm hearing, but there's really no interest in handwriting of any kind. You know, they want to take it out of the schools. I don't mind if you want to print or do italic form, as long as you do something. But there'll be a point at which a child will not be able to read a letter from grandpa to grandma. And that's a shame to lose that, you know? So what I will do sometimes is just, I had a friend's daughter who was, I did a piece for her mother. So I just, and you probably see me post this recently if you're following me at all. I posted this for her. And so her name is Isabella. She goes by Izzy, just to get her peek. And she really appreciated and liked it. But maybe someday she'll want to pick up the pen and try and do stuff. This is not handwriting, though. This is calligraphy. And as I always tell people when I post these things, this was written in several pieces and then posted together in Photoshop. And the mirror image you see of the bird and the quill is not something I can do offhand. I did the bird on the right offhand and rather quickly with the quill, and then scanned it, put it into Photoshop, flipped it, pasted it. If I was that good to be able to do mirror images like that, I'd be impressed too, but I'm not. So, but that's the kind of stuff I like doing nowadays. The shaded stuff I don't do as much anymore. I still love it and still promote it, but I really don't do it anymore to any great degree. Who else? Got to be some other questions, guys.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep up with here. Oh, here's one. It says, I was recently talking to Suzanne Cunningham about how to protect your work once it's out there so people don't pass it off as theirs. Is it really hard? It's a really hard task to do, but do you have any recommendations?
No, I mean, in this country, usually what you do is you try and patent something or copyright it. The problem is a patent or a copyright is only as good as your ability to pursue it legally. And usually that means lots of money. I was contacted about 3 or 4 years ago by folks over who knew my work over in Turkey, the country of Turkey, not the animal. And they were telling me somebody took my book and took my name off and put their name on it, was selling it. And you know, they were pretty upset about this. They contacted the guy. So I says, listen, tell him, because I wasn't making any money on the book. I says, put my name back on that book. If he does that, you tell him I said he can sell the book for himself, not me. I'm not looking for the profit from it. But the fact that somebody out there would do that is pretty amazing. You know, just blatantly take somebody else's name off and claim it as their own. But you know, it's a hard thing to do. I know several calligraphers, some big name ones that had their work. One that I can think of from a few years back was Maria Thomas. Maria had these little flowers she would put on her wedding envelope, very simple flowers. Everybody started doing it. It really bugged her, but what are you going to do? You know, even with Jake Weidman, people are copying some of his pen holders. It costs money to pursue patents and pursue copyrights. It's not something you can do easily. There's no way. The level of dishonesty, there's just no way to deal with it. I wish I could give you better advice than that, but my suggestion would be get yourself up to a level of skill that people just can't duplicate that easily. You know, but these folks, this one guy was apparently just taking my book and just taking my name off of it. You know, it's one thing to do that. It's another thing then to sell it as your own and make the profit from it. And honestly, I lost track of it. I have no idea if he did that or not. I had no recourse beyond, you know, beyond that. And I would not advise somebody else to do what I did. I mean, I did that because I don't make my money with this. I don't, you know, it's not what I do for a living. And so, but for people that depend upon it, I wouldn't know what to tell you there. You know, sorry.
There's a question that's asked, to use flexible fountain pens? If so, what is your favorite pen and nib?
You know, for some reason, Liz, when you start talking, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
I think and it's, yeah, it happens on the other group too, but one more time, flexible fountain pens?
Do you use flexible fountain pens? If so, which is your favorite?
As a general rule of thumb, I don't flex fountain pens. The reason for it is because all nibs, including the steel ones that we use for copper plate and stuff like that, will eventually spring, so the nib will come back together. Gold is softer than steel. And so even the ones that flex in Mont Blanc, I have just put a video up of a Mont Blanc 149 with the flex nib. It writes beautifully, but if I keep using it, it's eventually going to need to be fixed again. and gold will eventually spring. There's just no two ways about it, because steel does. And that's spring steel that we use for those types of pens. And so, no, I don't particularly like doing that. And I think most people that I've seen these videos of, people with these really wide shades, but if you look at how thick the hairlines are, for guys like myself and the people that do, copper plate work or ornamental penmanship, Spencerian, we're looking for really, really, really fine hairlines. And those nibs can't produce it. Those nibs cannot produce it. You just can't. I will show you an example of what I'm talking about. And people have done this, people like Mike Ward has come close to duplicating this, but with dip pens and dip pen steel nibs. What's the name of the, oh gosh. My memory ain't what it used to be. A.D. Taylor signature. Taylor. A.D. Taylor was one of the most precise, here it is, called the Bodenheimer specimen. A.D. Taylor was one of the most precise penmen that ever lived. This is the specimen here. Can you guys see this? That was not done slowly. That was done with the dip pen, and that was done at not rapid speed, but there was no hesitation. If I tried to do that with the way I write, there'd be squiggles in the hairlines. But those hairlines are so fine, you can't get that with a fountain pen. You just can't. You also need a certain amount of speed to get that thin. Now the guy's capitals and his flourishes are wonderful, but look at how good the lowercase letters are on the word Bodenheimer. Most people probably couldn't read that today simply because they're not used to looking at stuff like that, but that's W.H. Bodenheimer. But the flourishes, this is what attracts people to the art form to begin with, the swirls and curls. But Earl Lupfer put out, love to show this one. If I can find it. We call it spaghetti because there's so many flourishes, it just overrides the entire thing. You would think an Italian could write the word spaghetti. Here it is. This is just overuse. There's too much. It's all over the place. I mean, it's actually nicely done, but it's overused. What else do we need? Are there any fountain pen collectors online that are really into fountain pens? Can I beg your excuse for just 2 minutes? I've got to use the restroom. I take medication, and sometimes some things just won't wait. But my apologies. What else would you like to know? But yeah, flex with a fountain pen is not something I like to do. Let me see, where is the... What's that? Somebody say something? No? Let me find the part with the Mont Blanc fountain. And the Mont Blanc Flex fountain pen, I like, just its properties, but the problem is, to get that pen, you're close to $1,000, which is not okay for the vast majority of people. And by the way, I have my own YouTube channel for anyone interested, where I've demonstrated all my instructional videos for round, the script and the copper plate style are there. All my fountain pen videos are there. All the ones of me doing my calligraphic cursive work there, like the young lady's name I showed you before. Let me get this thing up real quick. I'll show you me using the actual, you may have seen it already, but.
So there's one question.
This is a real B&H customer story.
Go ahead.
Someone asked, is there any constants in ascendant angles considering that descendant work to 52 inches?
Yeah, well, what they're talking about is the,
This
is the angle of the script. And let me say this, the most important thing about script angle is that it be consistent. You know, people talk about 52 millimeters. I'm 52 degrees of an angle. I'm somewhere in that. I never really worried too much about that. Louis Mataraz had a much steeper slant to his letters. Just be consistent. That's the thing. You don't want to see, you know, one letter here, another letter like this. It's got to be consistent.
Yeah, you did write 52 degrees. I'm sorry. It was my eyes.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Mataraz angle, I think is where I have it. No, you know, Liz, I can't find anything when I need. That's why I like having the presentation put together before. Because it's just trying to search. I mean, I literally have gigabytes worth of images and even though I try to name them, slope, no, it wouldn't be under slope. Sorry. Anyway, let me just quickly show this clip to everybody. And so you're going to see me here using the Mont Blanc 149 calligraphy pen. And so I'll share my, okay.
Hi, folks. Thank you for joining me. I received a few requests.
Can everybody see and hear that? And anybody who can't?
Yes,
Okay, I'm going to start playing it.
yes.
Asking me to do a shaded bird flourish using a Mont Blanc 149 calligraphy pen. I'm about to do so right now. The paper is really art paper. It's my favorite paper to write on. The ink is a Shizuku Yamabudo, and those of you that follow my work know I only use that ink in my fountain pens. Why? The real reason is I like the color, and two, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to rinsing pens out. So if I do put in more, you know, ink, it's not going to be, you know, tarnished by some previous color ink that was in there. So, but here I go. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, you have to be very careful when you make these strokes because if you go too quickly, the pen's going to railroad no matter what pen it is. And that's because the viscosity or the resistance to flow of the ink does not want to come off the pen as quickly. So I might get some railroading here, but here we go. First, I'm going to make sure the pen is writing. I'm going to go ahead and do the outline of the wings first.
This is in real time,
I
guys.
turn the paper over because I like to get a better feel for the bottom wing. And so, but then this is the lower edge of the outer wing, like this. Okay. Could I have done that with the pen straight, with the paper straight up? Yes. It's just how you're comfortable. Now I'm going to go ahead and make the head. This is the third type of bird flourish that I do. Okay, so I did two before that were monoline. This is the third type of bird flourish. And then finally, I'm going to put the head on here like this. And I'll put a hint of a body that sort of parallels this lower wing to some degree, like this. And this is a little more involved design. Finally, I'll go ahead and put, not finally, but I'll go ahead and put the paddle-like tail here like this. And I'll come up here and then put the beak on like this. And finally, the head outline like this. And then lastly, go ahead and put an eye in like that. And that basically is the bird flourish.
Just to show people how it's done, it's freehand, what's used to be called offhand flourishing. But you got to keep in mind, I practiced this with pencils for years. I've been doing this for a long time. I know people say, oh, you make it look easy. Well, if you've been doing it for as long as I have, there's still sometimes I get it wrong. You know, it doesn't look like, you know, I miss the lines or don't make it proportional. But there are people who are really, really good at, like that guy, John, the colorist I showed you, the lefty, one of the master penmen that were inducted with Mike Soul. And you know, that really are skilled at doing this. There's people actually in Asia that can, I mean, somebody in mainland China, somebody in the Philippines that do remarkable work, Taiwan. It's just a matter of practice and wanting to do it, but there's no reason why you can't practice with a pencil. I asked John, how'd you learn to do it? And John DeCalabas told me, he said, Joe, I took lots of old newspapers and pencils, just kept doing designs until I got them down. You know, those designs are so well learned that I can't do them with my eyes closed, but almost, you know, so you have no to make strokes like that, you can have no hesitation. You got to know what you're doing, where you want to go. When I hesitate, I screw up. So, and I've got videos. I'll actually post the link to my main channel that you can explore around if you want. I mentioned Gilded Script. That's one of the first things that comes up, but there's different playlists you should look at on fountain pens. You just click on playlists and you'll see the different ones I have there. But where is the, and you know, let's see. Not that I want to say everyone. Okay. So I just posted a direct link to that YouTube site. But I've also got videos of fountain pens, just showing them off. I love photographing fountain pens almost as much as I like, you know, using them. Well, maybe not as much, but not too far away, I can tell you that. Let's see, what else? Yes, if you want to, you know, if you want to do flex work, then you get into dip pens. You know, if you want to do a little bit of flex with the fountain pen, okay. But as I said, you know, what would you rather bend, steel or gold? You know, everything has a point of where it's permanently deformed. You can't get it back. You have to send it to a repairman. If I was writing very high grade script with dip pens, I could only probably use the pen for maybe a quarter of a page before the line started thickening to my eye, which I would put it on the side, not throw it out, use it for practice, then pick up a new pen and start with that, because I didn't want the character of the letter to change. All of a sudden you get wider hairlines, which is, you know, unacceptable for some of us doing it. Any further questions?
Which is the
particular-
best?
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Which is the best paper? Can you give us an advice to use as a student?
It's actually one of the regrets I have about publishing that book. I put, for the advice I gave, Kodak bright white paper. Unfortunately, that book was written in 2012 or 2010 in that area. And they no longer make bright white papers. So now I got people like, well, where do you get bright white from? You know, use anything that doesn't bleed. And usually it means inkjet paper, or you don't want to use, you know, as you put the pen, you press and you start seeing anything feather out, don't use it. But you have to try on your own what works best for you. For fountain pens, I like the Rhodia R paper I mentioned. I can also use that with the oblique pen holder. And by the way, does everybody know why we use an oblique pen holder if you're a right-hander? You use it because if you use a straight pen holder in the right hand and try and angle that without, you know, having to conform your hand to the angle, you get, a ragged edge on the one side of the shade. And some people like the way that looks. I'm not one of those people. So the oblique pen holder was developed to make the shade easier to form, what they call facilitate the shade. There was a rather famous penman over in England, Frederick Marnes. Him and I exchanged some mail a few times, but Freddie wrote with a straight pen holder, and he had a jagged edge on the right side of the shade, which he loved. It was fine, you know, but most of us use that. And we also believe that the oblique pen holder helped the penmen at the time, the guys like Matarazzo and Taylor, elevate Spencerian script up to an artistic, ornamental level. It helped facilitate that kind of writing. And if you have not seen a guy named Michael Ward write ornamental penmanship, you need to watch him. He has a very, very light touch. Most people have a very heavy touch. Yes.
Okay.
Michael Ward. you know, I didn't think anybody could write like that any longer, but he can. He's probably the best at it right now. There may be others I'm not aware of. Certainly in the field of what I used to do, the engrosser script, the person I would look to, you know, there's actually many people out there. Nina, David Grimes has many of these folks have online courses and they're excellent, excellent people. And you always want to work with those who can produce the best samples. Because if you work from mediocre samples and you don't get that good, you really, I could use a different word, which I will not use in this company, but if you shoot for mediocre and you can't hit it, you're really not good. But if you shoot for the best you can do and you get close, you're usually pretty darn good. So, you know, so that's why I always studied. I wanted the exemplars from the best known folks out there. Lupfer from the past, Mataraz, all of them. Yeah, so. Anything else in the chat, Liz, or anybody?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. It says, what advice could you give people who are starting with calligraphy?
Well, I think pick a style and stick with it. You don't want to buy multiple books, start learning from different sources. If you want to use my books, or at least my instructional material, stick with it until you get to a certain level of proficiency. If you're going to use mine and then start looking at other people's, you can get confused. And I would also recommend sticking to a style. I would not want to bounce between Spencerian and copper plate, or, you know, and there used to be a school of thought that you should first come into this learning how to do regular business or plain penmanship, and then go to Spencerian, which isn't a bad idea, but you know, we don't have instructors anymore, you know, and the best thing to do is to see it done live. Is even with the videos I have, there's no substitute for doing it live, none. Now, most of you, I think, hopefully have seen the book that Jose translated for me. That was actually from a workshop. Has anybody downloaded the one for the iPad or the Mac computer? It's free as well, but it's completely interactive. And I can actually show you if I can find it. Here it is. So I'm going to share this real quick, just so you can see it, as long as I can see it. I think this is it. Can you see this here? This is the Apple program iBooks. This is specifically what I made this for. And if you look, you can see my book right here. So I click on that. So this will show you what's in here. And so let me just scroll through this. So you've got images that can be made larger, or click it down. We also have ones with galleries in here, multiple pictures, but also embedded in here are the videos.
I'd like to show you how I make an oval. Do that.
And this
we're
can
gonna
be
use
brought
9
up
pen
to
points.
maximum size if
An
you
oval
wanted
is
to do
one
that.
of it's the actual fundamental stroke in engrosser script. I mean,
But this is the
almost every
way, I'm
single
gonna stop
letter in
that.
engrosser
This is
script
the way
formed off
the
basic
book was meant to be used. So you go through it and you got all these different videos to look at in there. You don't have to go searching for them. I have no idea. I have no idea why that's highlighted. But then you've got galleries like this. You can scroll through them. Click and open them up. This is the way I envision the book for the maximal learning. And this is what I hope people will get, but there are people that cannot access the Apple Store or iBooks, don't have Mac or Apple devices. So I produced a PDF. So you can just, and most people a lot of people want to print things out and have it in front of them. So that's what the PDF is for. But if I'm not mistaken, the PDF contains the links to all the videos at the top of those pages, I believe, to be, if you want to look at the link, look at the video. But this was the way I envisioned this to be done through iBooks. And you can, there's ways to do it. I'm not good at manipulating this on the computer. It's better for the iPad, in my opinion. But you can scroll around the different parts of the book. And, you know, what I did when I did this, I tried to come up with groups of letter forms that were very similar and that had common points. And some of you may have seen, I do this little trick online where in videos where I write this basic I form here. I'll write out 6 of them. And it looks like all 6 I's in a row. And all of a sudden I'll put a lead in here, a dot above this one, and a loop out here. Next thing you know, I have 3 different letter forms. I tried to make people see what was common about these letters. You know, an I should look like a U if you look at it here, and a W. There's
No, it's not showing that. It's showing a book. It's not showing the
Oh,
letters.
really? All right, hold
Yeah.
on. Hold on. I'm sorry about that, guys. Let me see if I can. I might not be able to demonstrate the thing. If I open this up, let's try this now. Sorry. Oh, I see. I think it's stuck on that. Can you see letter forms now?
No, not yet.
No?
No. It says reading now at the top of the page.
No, all right. Never mind, guys. I wanted to show you what I can refer you to a video I have on YouTube again of how the book is supposed to function. And if I could find that, I will post it to you. And if I can't, I'll get it to Martha, and she can make it available online. But it's I think it's under
Like a dip pen that spreads out,
Yeah, I'm just-
flexible. Yeah, but there are people
well.
I joked around about before how it was my nemesis.
I don't want to waste too much time looking for it.
Once I
But it's on my YouTube site, and it shows you what the book was meant. I actually put the thing out just as I was about to release the book, just to show people. I was the first interactive book on this subject. I don't know if anything else has been produced, but you know, my goal was to give you the videos and the instruction all in one place, which I think I achieved. But you have to have, unfortunately, you have to have the Mac source, either a computer with iBooks or the iPad with iBooks. And iBooks is a free Apple program. But there are limitations. Or if you live in the part of the world that can't download from Apple, I actually made the download available on my own server. So some of you may or may not know I'm the guy who started Zenarian.com. It's still up and running. It's more of a historical page to talk about penmen. And I've got some help with David Grimes now working with that. But yeah, let me see if I could find the link to the video. So any other questions, guys? Comments? Things you'd like to know about? See, what about like vintage pen points? They're so expensive now. It's crazy. Let's see your channel. Sorry, my book.
Does it matter which type of ink you use?
Yes. Let me just get this link posted, and I'll address that in a minute. So this is the preview of my script in the copper plate. You'll be able to see what it's supposed to be for those of you who couldn't see what I was trying to show you before. And this is being illustrated on an iPad. And if somebody has an iPad and hasn't downloaded it yet, just reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to show you how you can do it if you can't access the app. If you do have an iPad or a Mac computer, and you have running their Apple's iBooks program, just go to the store and look for my last name. Just put Vitolo and you'll see the book come up. And again, it's a free book. It's not costs nothing to download it. And what was I going to do? Oh, in the chat section, here's the link to the video for the iBook. If you want to click on that and then look at it later on, you can. Liz, what was I supposed to be doing after this?
Where were you talking about? If the
Ink.
ink matters, the ink.
So, right.
Right.
So with inks, the operative word for inks is what they call viscosity, resistance to flow. High viscosity inks are very thick. Low viscosity inks are almost like water. If the ink is too liquidy, too watery, the nib may not be able to form the shade. It may railroad and give you two different lines instead of a shade. If it's too thick, it won't come off the nib. Bill Lilly used to use Pelican 4001 red ink. He loved it. He put so much gum arabic into it. This is for dip pens now, not for fountain pens. Put so much gum arabic into it that it wouldn't come off the pen. He had to dip his pen into the ink, then first into water, then into the ink to get it to try and write. I don't like ink like that. The inks that you can buy, the professional, made by guys like Neil McCaffrey, those write beautifully right out of the bottle. The two practice inks I used were Tom Norton's Walnut Drawing Ink, which is sepia colored ink, beautiful, beautiful ink. And the other was McCaffrey's Red Violet ink. The one that they call the walnut ink, it's actually not made from walnut husk, it's made from peat moss, but it's a beautiful sepia color. And then the McCaffrey ink with the red is made with an old form of red from there's a beetle, actually an insect, the carapace, the shell of the insect, the cochineal beetle, used for food coloring and dyes in many years. That's what he uses for the red in there. So it's McCaffrey's Red Violet ink. Let me see, Jacobson. Just to show you what the thing writes like, if I could find, it's an E. And Liz has heard me tell this story a few times. You know, with Neil, I liked his Red Violet ink so much that I tried to talk him into changing the name to Vitolo Violet, partially joking. But he never did. But he did make me a few bottles of it with a label like that. This one I'm about to show you was written by me using the Tom Norton's Walnut Drawing ink. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so that's the beautiful sepia color ink. This was actually, you know, the color of would be walnut ink, but also sometimes the blue-black iron gold ink that I mentioned earlier, and because it had iron in the pigment, it would rust, and you would get this beautiful brown. Da Vinci's notebooks use this, and you see these beautiful brown images, but they were really rusting letters. And in the presence of water, that will generate free radicals and actually cut the paper. And there are specimens at IAMPET that actually are missing the shades because they cleave the paper and the shades are gone. So, but that's the example of the Red Violet ink, the sepia colored Norton's Walnut Drawing ink. But you've all seen, I think if you've seen the cover of my, well, maybe you haven't, where I wrote the beautiful art. There it is. This is the cover of my, this is part of the cover of my book. And so that's the Red Violet ink, if you can see that. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah. If you look at this, the way it's written, okay, the uniformity of the slant is there, the X height. These are things that, you know, we look for. So a lot of times people will write and they'll miss the header line, they'll miss the baseline. It's happened to me. It still happens to me. But, you know, when you're trying to write your best stuff, you want it to be all the same slant. You want it to be right at the X height, no higher, no lower. The same thing with the baseline. You want to hit that baseline. These are things we look for. And but consistency. It's less important that this is 52 or 51 or 50 than it is that it's all consistent. And it becomes harder to get like ovals on that slant, because you have basically sometimes the oval can deviate and it still won't throw the eye off. You know, and you can sometimes, you know, but all of these letters are formed on imaginary ovals, which I think some of you may have seen me talk about. But any questions? Ink, so the
Asking
viscosity.
what,
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, it's
but
okay.
just don't know if you've already talked about nibs, and for beginners, I'm using the Zebra G nib because
Yeah.
it's easy to get. But I don't know what would be the recommendation for like a nib for beginners, you know, like.
Well, the Zebra G, most people are using G nibs now, but I would say if you want to try and produce the really fine script, you have to get a nib that's more flexible and more supple. And sometimes it's hard to explain this, but I couldn't have done some of the work I did in the past with something like a Nico G nib. I couldn't have done it. The nib tine has to respond to the slightest movement, and stiff nibs don't. You know, if you ever feel the flex of the nib, my favorite nib was basically based on the Gillette 604 EF. It was called the Musselman Perfection #1, a red box one. It was soft enough so most people couldn't use it. But that was able to give me, once I switched to that nib, my ability to write better script increased dramatically. And a vintage 303, how do you tell vintage from modern? Vintage 303 is bronze colored. The modern is more blue black. It's not made from bronze, but the way in which you get those different colors is by heating the nib. And so the modern 303 is like a hypodermic needle. It's so sharp, most people couldn't write with it. A good nib though, like the Principality or the Zenarian Fine Rad, the problem with those nibs is that, I mean, I was involved in the bidding war several years ago for a box, unopened box of Jalop Principalities. That's 144 of those nibs, and I stopped bidding at $2,000.
Wow.
And what do you
It's just,
suppose?
I just thought that the square tops that you showed, I mean, I can never get to do that with the nips that I have. So
I have
you-
videos on how I did that on those.
okay.
All right. So basically what you do is it's almost like a cheat. You don't start at the top. You start below it and you draw the square in and fill it in.
Okay.
It's called a retouch square top or retouch cutoff at the bottom. Could I do it with the nib? Yes, I could do it, but I typically didn't because for me, it wasn't about proving I could do something. It was about getting it right. And that's something the penmen from the past would do, the calligraphers from the past. They didn't care that somebody thought, oh, wow, he can do that or she can do that right off the bat. And by the way, there were women who did it. We call them penmen from that period, but the women refer to themselves as penmen as well. But it was less important about the skill of doing it than it was about getting it right and correct. And they'd go back and retouch things, draw things in. I have specimens that were meant for publication from the past, not my own, but from the past masters, where they would use whiteout for the photo printing, and because it wouldn't get picked up. It's not about, I show in videos I can do this for real, but it's less important to me than it is to get the specimen right. But I don't want to mislead anybody. That's why when I posted earlier the picture I did for that, the one I did for that young woman, the little girl, with the mirror image bird and quills. I scanned that, duplicated it, flipped it, repasted it together in Photoshop. I don't possess that kind of skill. No, I don't think anybody does. There's a video of John DeColibus doing bird flourishes with two hands, with right and left hand like this. When I talked to him, he says, Joe, you know how many times I had to reshoot that till I got it right? We tend to look at only one level of this. And it's not my intent, to make anybody think I can do something I can't. I don't have that, I don't think anybody has that level of expertise and skill. But to answer your original question, nothing wrong with the Nico G, but at some point you're going to want to move to try the Leonard principle. But these aren't cheap today. They're, like $4 a piece now or something. But the finer the point and the more flexible, the more challenge you're going to have to lighten your hand up. And even with fountain pen folks, I mean, I hear people write, I watch them write, for the reviews, and I could hear it. I can hear them writing. And, they're basically ripping into the paper. I used to think I had a really light hand. And then I found out I didn't. And I tried specifically to lighten it up. And I've got a much lighter hand now than I used to, but not as light as someone like Michael Ward. I think, Liz, you saw Michael Ward write live, right? Were you on Larry's thing when he was writing?
Yes.
Amazing. It's just amazing. Or someone like John DeColibus. I remember sitting next to him using my oblique pen holder with my vintage nib. You could hear me writing on the paper. John said, let me see that. Started writing. I couldn't hear it. I just couldn't hear it. That was my first clue that I was writing too heavy. Because we're used to writing with ballpoint pens, you got to press into the paper. And it takes a while to get away from that. And sometimes you lose control if you write too lightly. But also, guys, you don't really ever want to write on a hard surface, like a single sheet of paper on a tabletop. Most calligraphers I know, penmen, whether they're writing in grosser script or Spencerian, write on anywhere from 2 to 4 pages of cushion below it, like other sheets. I usually take an entire pad of the Rhodia art paper and write on the stack of papers. I just fold the top over and write on that. By the way, I also have free guidelines I can print out on my website, zenarian.com. So if you want to print out the guide sheets I use in the videos, it was all meant to be used as one consolidated unit or one consistent way of doing this. I can see where I have those things listed and then put the link in there. But yeah, the guide sheets that I use, I think they were on zenarian.com. But it's been a while since I updated this page.
If By the way, Michael Ward has a fantastic YouTube channel.
Oh, he's not better than mine though, right?
That's true.
It's amazing to me just how good he's become. And yeah, oh, I know where where I have the link for that. I don't think there's anybody, honestly, anybody at that style of writing better than him right now. Just like I think from the standpoint of engrosser script, David Grimes might be as good as you can get right now. Richie Wei from China is also probably up there, but there's lots of people that have exceeded my skill level, even at my best. Let's see. Here are the script guidelines from the videos. Okay, I'll put this into the chat section. Let me just make sure that it's correct and writes. Yes. The first page of the guidelines show how to properly use them. And they're in, I think, 3 different sizes: smaller, medium, and large. The smallest is probably the easiest way to go in the beginning because you don't have to swing out as far. But John and I used to like to write big at some point because I could better form the letters. And we were speaking to a graduate from the Old Zenarian College at the time and he was a master. At the time we spoke to Chris, he was like 86. And the guy had more energy than anybody I've ever met. And he would I actually told John, he says, you know, John, only amateurs write large. You know, experts can write small. And so John and I wanted to have T-shirts made up for the IAMPA convention that said amateur in penmanship, just because we like to write large. But those guys were able to write, I mean, so small, like the lowercase is the thickness of a penny. You wouldn't believe it. It's just like, and accurately. I could never do that. My eyes wouldn't permit me. So my eyes aren't good enough to do it. But did you have any more questions? So your name is
Darwin.
Darwin. Any more questions?
Yeah, well, yeah, I started with the 8mm height and I'm going down to 6. But what would be like the standard, or most people write 6 or 7 or
Yeah, whatever. I mean,
up to...
standard is, I mean, in the Zenarian college, when they used to teach that, they used to use this foolscap paper that, you know, children would use. But usually the larger letter would just allow you to explore the letter form even more easily. It's sometimes difficult to understand the form, the ovals and things until you see, you know, larger. And that's one of the reasons why. And plus, I was teaching a lot, so I also wanted to do something that people could see. If I was writing, very miniature, it'd be very difficult to show people, you know, how that was. And a big development came back in the 2000, I forget when it was, but the development or the use of the document camera that could show you writing as you were actually doing it for a convention. Was before that, we were writing on regular chalkboards, green boards with white chalk. Let me see, ovals. But for what I used to do, the engrosser script, ovals were the basis of everything. And so you've probably seen some of these images here. Let me just open this up. We're doing on time, guys. Everybody all right? Because honestly, I could talk about this stuff all night. Not that you want me to, but I can. That's me. I can. Where's the image I'm looking for? Okay, hold on. Here it is. Okay. I'm going to try and share this PowerPoint. You should be able to see this. Where is it? Here it is. Can you guys see this PowerPoint image?
Yes.
Okay. So this basically represents a capital B, and I try to show how the oval, now I've got actually a better image of this somewhere, but in the same thing, I wrote the word osseous to show all the imaginary ovals that form these letters, and this leads to consistency, and it also leads to consistent spacing. Unfortunately, it was not the image I hoped to show you, but I could only show so much of it and find so much in any given time. Somebody, this probably is easier to see because it's colored. And if you ever wanted me to talk on a specific subject, let me know. I'll have a presentation ready to go. So I'm not, but this shows how ovals build these letter forms. And you can even see like the connection between the O and the U here. Here, that's formed on the same oval. That defines the spacing. and how you connect these things is also critical. Defines the spacing. All these things are ovals, even the compound curve. And so if you can't get these things, and this is not something I would think about as I was writing it. This is how I used to evaluate what I did. I would scan my specimen, put it into PowerPoint, and then make these little ovals and see if I was consistent. If I wasn't, why wasn't I consistent? There are still letters to this day that give me grief. And a good example of one is the capital D in the grocer script. I hate that letter. I mean, hate it. And I've been doing this a long time, and I hate it so much that I wrote an entire article on just how to write that letter, to try and figure it out, and I still get it wrong. Years ago when I tried to write my first letter to Bill Lilly, I must have ripped up 50 sheets of paper because I couldn't get the capital D and the word dear correctly. Dear Bill, and I'm serious, I just couldn't do it. So I finally had to draw it with the pencil and then trace over it, just to stop wasting paper. But that I don't like. And even with penmanship, the cursive calligraphy I do, I'm not good with stem loops. I'm just not. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. And unfortunately, I think I have a lot more than I should at this point in my life. But any other questions for me?
May I?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Paola. I'm from Mexico City. And I would like to know if there's like a special or specific guidance for flourishing or for starting flourishing. I have looked for books or so, but I find it like once you already know, then you can use those books. But like
Right.
for beginners.
Right. Are you talking about letter flourishing or bird flourishing or what?
Would like more like bird flourishing.
Okay, yes.
Because
There's
letter flourishing makes more sense when you're like practicing and when you're like more into the oval stuff,
Right.
and then you understood that makes more sense when you're flourishing letters.
Before I answer your question, I'm going to post another link in the chat section. This is what I call my contributions document. Here it is. I got it online. And what this was is a somewhat self-centered article because I wanted to document what I've done and what I've put forward. And so if you advance to page 10 of the document, you will see all the links to all of the free PDFs I posted. And part of them would be for flourishing as well. But this I'll put into the, it's a large document. It's hold on. It's around, hold on, 42 pages long, but it documents the stuff I've done. Just because I'm a historian, I want people to know my contribution. It may seem self-centered, and so it may very well be. But this is the actual link to that document. But again, from page 10, they also have zip files containing a ton of photographs that you may be very interested in. And this is here it is. But as I was going to say about the flourishing birds and stuff like that, believe it or not, so I just put that link in there to the contributions document. There is a book that's sold on Amazon called Lupfer's Ornate, it's called Ornate Pictorial Calligraphy. It's by Dover Press. I don't think the book is more than like 10 or 12 US. It's
it's the white one, right?
Well, the last time I seen it was a gray cover.
Yeah, I think I have it.
You have it?
Uh-huh.
There might be some flourishing things. I think I have some flourishing ones in that contributions document from others that but it's amazing what some of those folks were able to do. But yeah, I mean, you work on a few designs and stick with it, draw them with the pencil rather than wasting ink and everything. Get the basic design down to the point where you can draw it. You just know how to put it onto paper. Did you see me demonstrate that Mont Blanc pen with the bird?
Earlier today?
Yes.
No, I think I was late.
I don't want to show it again for people, but there's a video online. I might have, guys, did I put that link in there? I might have put the link in there. YouTube.
Yes, you made it.
Yes. Yeah, let me just see if that was it. It should be in there on my page. But anyway, the flourishing has to be done. I mean, you could do something slowly, but the reality is you gotta know the form so well you don't have to think about it. And if you watch that video, hopefully when people watch it, they realize I was just doing that. There was no real thinking about, okay, how do I draw this and slow it down? I've done it so many times that it usually makes it look almost effortless to people, but it's not. And that's, if you also noticed during that thing, I really didn't speak a lot. If I was doing monoline with just a regular fountain pen, I could talk, but when you're doing shaded script, the thing that makes shaded script and flourishing with flex pens so much more challenging is that if you use a pencil or a regular pen, you're writing in 2 dimensions, X and Y axis, right? The difference with engrosser script or copper plate or Spencerian is that at some point you have to go to a 3rd axis and press into the paper. And that's what makes that more challenging. Is at what point do you press, how much pressure, how do you come off of it? It takes a while to learn that. And especially with the novice trying to flex $1,000 fountain pen, it's not a good idea. Not a good idea. I've been to fountain pen shows where people have bent nibs trying to do that. Flex is something that takes practice. You have to know how much to press in and control it. And so, so I don't know if I answered your question. Sometimes I talk so much I forget the question.
It's okay.
Did I answer your question or?
Yeah. And I have already the link.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna take a look for it, and I just keep on practicing. Seems like.
Which link do you have to what, the bird video, or the one, the PDF?
I got the ornamental penmanship.
Okay. Then if you want, if you look in the chat section now, I'm going to post a link to that video of me doing the bird with the Mont Blanc 149. I just
there
posted
you
that
go.
link there. So you can watch that later on. Any questions, you can just, I try to answer everyone who writes to me, but you can imagine it's not always possible. And I used to do online instruction. I can't do that anymore either. First of all, I don't have the time for it, but I get requests from people all around the world to do it, which is flattering. But trust me, if I had the ability to get the time to do it, I would do it, because it's the thing I enjoy doing most in the world. But my day job takes up a lot of my time.
I know it's
Hi,
not
me
only you.
again. Me again. Do you have any recommendations on maybe a chapter or book on spacing or layout, like when you want to write like a phrase? I mean, if it's gonna be centered, or I'm trying to like write and then cut up the pieces and try to accommodate everything on a page. But
Believe it or not, that's really how we do it. I mean, Mike Sull, I remember watching him do a certificate for somebody, and you can write things out in the general form, maybe not perfect, but then paste them together. What I sometimes did to speed that up was to take a font that was close to what I would do. There are fonts like that, copper plate fonts, and the size and just try and match it. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do, but most of the stuff you see me post, well, you'll see my engrosser script work, that was done by eye. I'm not saying I have any gift for it, but I didn't have the patience to do a lot of that mapping out stuff. But when I would do a certificate for someone, like a birth certificate, which I really didn't, I did those also for free because I didn't want the person to tell me I want it done on this kind of paper with this. I did it my own way because it was for free, but I would basically draw all the lines. I always write with all the lines. I think I had something like that somewhere, but if I knew what the questions were before, I could have actually gotten these things in together. And I think it was Francesca's I did. Let me see something. Sometimes I can't. Oh, maybe not. Francesca. No, make a certificate. And then every once in a while, I'll go back and I'll see a certificate I did long ago and cringe, like, oh my God, I can't believe it's still on somebody's wall. But what I will do, and if those of you who followed me long enough, you'll see I've shown my early work to people, because I don't want anyone to think that you're born writing at a certain level. It took a lot of work for me to get to whatever level I got to. And it's not just even I've got specimens from the masters. Lupfer, when he first got to the Zenarian College, C.P. Zahner called him into the office after the first semester and says, "Kid, I know you like this." He says, "But you don't have it. You may need to find a different line of work." And Lupfer told a story to the IAMPIT founders that it lit a fire under him, and he eventually became one of the best penmen that ever lived. But there's a lot of stories like that in penmanship. There was well, I'll tell one more. The great Louis Mataraz might have been the greatest ornamental penman ever to live. And then there was Francis B. Courtney, was also considered at an incredibly high level. They called him the pen wizard. They were sitting at a convention. I don't know which one it was. And the legend says that Courtney wrote a word on a piece of paper and shoved it over to Mataraz and says, beat that in a day. Mataraz took the paper, wrote one letter, pushed it back to him and said, beat that in a lifetime. I thought that was a great story. But, you know, the reality is with this stuff, you have to do whatever you need to get the thing to come out right. And if it means mocking the whole thing up, cutting and pasting pieces, that's what you do. Here is the piece I was looking for. So if you look at this, I did doing this, it may be hard for you to see, but this shows you all the pencil lines before I wrote the piece. Can you see that? So I've got that, yeah, I've got that mapped out for the capitals, the the ornamentation, where the script was. And when I did this, not making excuses, but this happened. I did this a long time ago, and I wasn't necessarily at my best when I did it, but it is what it is. And this is I'll show you the finished piece here. Sorry. That was the finished piece. All that pencil stuff had to be erased to get this. Now, there are criticisms of this that people could write, and that's like it's too much empty space, but that was all done by mapping things out. You got to know where you're going and then try and adhere to that. But modern calligraphers like to fill space up. I've done some of that now where I put birds into things, and the modern calligraphers also sometimes have a problem with the old penmen because they would use too many styles in one document. The copper plate style, the text lettering, the I don't know, italics, but that's the way they were at the time. They were also trying to promote themselves and show what they could do. It's just a different time, different sense of aesthetics.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sure. Any other questions, anybody? Yeah, and again, I can, if you guys want some specific thing addressed, I could always do a more formal presentation at some point. But it's difficult to search out with all the files I have. Even though I name them, I forget what I named them. I just try and find it, and when I'm not looking for them, that's when I could find them.
Yeah, and Jorge Gomez wrote in Spanish about the position when writing. I don't know if it's hand position or body position, but he
well, if you're going to be writing professionally, I mean, your posture is going to be important, because you got to be able to, you don't want to have your back go into spasm or your neck start hurting you. And I know it's something that Paul Antoni, the English calligrapher, has spoken about, his posture when he writes. I write with my eyes, they're almost on the paper. It's just the way I do it. I used to do dentistry like that, but as far as hand position, that's another thing. I've always said, put your hand on the paper in the position you normally write at and rotate the paper. And I've got a video on that too, I think, that shows how to do it, because you don't want to take a natural writing and all of a sudden contort your hand to fit the angle. The paper should conform to you. Now, there is a problem when somebody has a very different kind of grip. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way. But, you have to be able, your surface has to conform to you. The other thing I like to tell people is that, when I first started, I couldn't keep the ink on the nib. I couldn't get enough ink to write more than half a letter. And so I didn't understand. So what I did at the time, being a dentist, I would take the little rubber bands that orthodontist use on braces, and I'd wrap it around the nibs like a reservoir. And so when I first went to IAMPIT in 1999, and I will say the people there are so wonderful. They may say master penman and all this stuff, they're willing to help anyone. And so I went up to John DeCalabis, who's, and still probably the best in the world at what he does. And he sat me down and showed me what I was doing. He says, Joe, these things have coatings on them to protect them from rust. You got to get the coating off them. Oh, okay. Because I watched him write. and he was writing like almost half of a word with this one dip. And how do you do that? I just had no clue how he did it. So he sat me down. Let's just think about this. Probably the best in the world. That would be like me going to a golf tournament and being able to sit down with Tiger Woods, or the best golfer of the day, and they give me some advice on what I was doing. It would never happen. They wouldn't even let you near the guy, probably. I'm sure he'd probably help you if you're able to get him cornered, but that's everybody's willing to help. And I did the same thing as I got better. Sit there and show. And IAMPIT was unique in that now they pay instructors. But at the time, we used to pay our own way. We used to pay our own ticket fee. We used to pay for the hotel room, and then do the lectures and the workshops for free. It's changed since then, but it was a different time. Different time. We had trouble getting like 60 people to show up. Now there's like 200 people that want to come. But if you ever get a chance, I know you're in a different company. We have people from Japan come in, people from Sao Paulo come up. But it's expensive. And but the convention is not ridiculously expensive, but the trip probably would be nowadays. But there's no substitute for seeing it done in person, especially by somebody who is either at or almost at master level. There's nothing like it. I watched a guy named Del Tisdale, who was trained by old masters, and Del was an excellent ornamental penman. And I remember my friend Daniel saying to me, who met Del, Joe, if you blink, you'll miss him writing something. That's how fast he'll execute that. Get out of here. You can't do that. I remember seeing him in Chicago, and it almost looked like Del took his hand and did this. And 2 letters were formed like capitals. And I might be exaggerating a little bit, but I said, do that again. And I'm watching, I still couldn't figure it out. But he says, Joe, if you do, I don't know, 100,000 letters of practice. And he claims he wore out like 2 tabletops writing, which I won't doubt. But, the guy was, and also responsible for much of the stuff that you see in IAMPIT archives. He rode all over the country to meet these masters from the past before they passed away, and purchased some of the stuff they owned. And all the pen points I used came from him. At the time I was paying probably around $4, although I got them through John DeCalabas from Dell. Those same pen points probably not, instead of $4 a piece, they probably bring about $50 a piece now. But what are you going to do if you want to buy a Principality just for your collection? That's okay. But what are you going to do? Use it? If somebody spends that much money on a vintage, and those vintage pen points are just amazing. The ones that you can use, I honestly could not have gotten my script to wherever it was without those pen points. But if you find good ones today, the Leonard Principle. But at some point, you're going to want to move away from the Nico G. If you're doing envelopes for a living and stuff like that, then stay with it, because that pen you can drive through a concrete wall. You can still use it. You can't do that to Principality. And Bill Lilly used to stick his nib to clean it into a potato, to clean the nib off. Can't do it to the nibs. You'd break the tines on, you'd break the nib tines. There's so much good stuff out there. Take a look at I don't know if you hear when I talked about my contributions document. There's a document that has all the different PDFs, starting on page 10, I believe it is. These are PDFs I've compiled. Some of them instructional, some of them are more historical in nature, but you got access to a lot of information there.
Well, thank you so much for everything.
Oh, thank you. If you guys ever want to do it again, just let me know. But it's probably better to have some topic, because I was looking at fountain pen talk about, or, calligraphy, pointed pen, or the penmanship stuff. But, and I'm willing to talk about it all, but it sometimes does better to, to focus it down and do a presentation. So I'm not constantly looking for things, which is sometimes hard to find. Liz, do you want to say something?
Someone had wrote a Las Dos, por favor. I don't understand. It's the 2, or is it?
He meant both. Talk about the hand posture and the body. So that was, he.
Oh, I see. Yeah, look, I think Paul was somebody who addresses that more.
Yeah, I've seen videos of him.
Yeah,
actually,
I could not write. I mean, I think it's a great thing if you can.
Well, Antonio, yes.
We do the same thing in dentistry. We teach our students now to sit in the chair upright. They have magnifying glasses on, and they don't bend over. Where me, I used to work on a patient. I'm like this, whatever worked. I was in dentistry at the beginning of the magnifying glasses. I have the first generation of one of the company's oroscoptics magnifying glasses. I could never get used to them, you know, so I probably could use them for script. But if you watch me, you watch me write, I'm right on top of the paper, you know, my eyes aren't that good. Falling apart, unfortunately. All right, if there's no other questions. If I don't stop.
No, not for me, but it's a really helpful document that you send us. The link
Oh.
with the PDFs.
Yeah. And part of the reason why I did all that is because when I first started teaching this, I was like a fire hydrant on full blast. I had so much information coming out of my mouth. Nobody could keep up with me and remember it. So I started documenting it. And it was a good thing I did that. And I started writing articles. When I first got into IAMPIT, I think I published somewhere around 60 articles within the span of just a few years. And because it's not like writing a scientific article. Those are pretty difficult and challenging to get published. But and then someone who's no longer with us, Nanda Luca, who's a friend of mine from New York, suggested I compile them into a book. And I didn't want to do it because they were written as individual articles. It didn't have the narrative of a book, the continuity of a book. So finally, she got on me to do it. And I believe I published that in 2012. But it was not read by anybody. I didn't, you know, John Neal, I think, wanted to put it out for like $40 with I didn't want to charge for it. And I'm not trying to make myself sound like a good guy. I wanted to make sure people who were interested were able to know what I knew, because I had to pull this stuff from the past. There's no one around. You know, I sat down with Bill Lilly for maybe 3 hours total, but a lot of us had to find this stuff. When I talk about Michael Ward or John DeCalabas, this is stuff we had to find on our own. But why make somebody else go through all that? They didn't have to. You know, if I didn't meet John in 1999 at IAMPIT and he showed me how to use that pen, I might not have stayed with it, might not have, you know, and it's that kind of thing. And so if you've seen before on my pen holder, that pay it forward concept, I just try to pay it forward. Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And because normally if I was traveling, let's say I had business or a meeting in you know, let's say in Mexico somewhere, what I used to do is contact the local calligraphy guild and then offer to speak to them. Just use it for an hour, but just to help spread the word. That's all. And I hope other people would do the same thing. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Me at least.
No, I'm sure. Listen, I appreciated it too when I was given the help. Even Bill Lilly, I mean, legendary Bill Lilly. It's just, you know, it's amazing to me. I got time to a chance to spend with them, you know, or John or any of those folks. You know, they were very giving. The legendary Louis Mataraz. I kept hearing about this book, the Mataraz book. It's one of the best books ever produced, right? And I was told by my friends that, you know, a few people have copies, but they won't let you see them. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why not? Because it was their thing. You know, they owned it. You didn't have it. And so my dear friend Kathy Saunders, who's up in Rochester, New York, gave me one of her 2 copies. I went home that weekend and scanned that copy cover to cover and sent it to anybody who would pay for the shipping on the CD. The idea that somebody would hold information is just abhorrent to me. Why not share it? And I think that book is now on, that scan is now on the IAMPIT website. Contains a rare book section. And a lot of the books I scanned as well as others are posted there. So you can see those books in their entirety. You know, because nobody knew who they were. They knew all about the English, you know, calligraphers like Edward Johnston, who made incredible contributions, but nobody knew. They thought nobody wrote with quills and did broad pen work until Johnston came along. W.E. Dennis was doing that in the late 1800s here. Loved it. We actually have some of the quills he used in the IAMPIT archives. Right. So I think I better shut up now. I'm going to keep going. So
that's great, and really very, very nice resolution. It's all clear because I've seen PDFs.
Yeah.
With you cannot read. They're so blurry and so.
Yeah, I mean, some of them it's unavoidable, but I can tell you this: David Grimes on his website has one of the best versions of the Zenarian Manual. Has everybody heard of the Zenarian Manual?
Yep.
We in IAMPIT call that the Bible with a little b. But he got an incredibly high resolution scan of the entire book and got permission from Zaner Bloser to do it. And it's free online. And so if you can look
Yeah,
up David
got it, that
Grimes.
too.
I don't know if I could find that link directly, but I highly recommend
Yeah,
that.
I think it's on his website.
It is. I just don't know what the
Uh-huh.
website is though. David Grimes. I don't know if it's under David or Mass Grimes.
And really, this is a great job. This is, I mean, sharing knowledge is super valuable.
Well, I mean, that's my job, during the day.
Because, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people who just, well, here in Mexico, that happens too. Like, no, I'm not sharing this, I'm not sharing that. Or you don't do this, or you don't do that. Some people here might know about that.
Yeah, but again, the other thing I like to tell people too, I think, so I chose to give it away, but it's not the way it needs to be done all the time. There are people who their livelihood depends on this. And I don't,
Exactly. Mhm.
and then I have no problem with them charging for stuff, but I didn't, my day job pays for my passions, as I like to say. David Grimes, Mass Grimes.
But you are so kind to share with us all your knowledge or your calligraphy. Yeah.
And again, it's because of what was done for me when I first came in. Without that, I would have probably left the American Penmanship bibliography. I'm on David's site right now. I'll just post.
It looks like someone already posted
Oh, okay, good.
the link.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be falsely modest. I just really wanted to keep people in the art form, because I see so many people have a love of it initially and then leave because they couldn't figure out how to use the pen, couldn't figure out how to use the nib. And I was there myself at one time. And to have somebody take you by the hand and say, do this, this, and this, and it'll work. And it did. And then somebody turned me on to vintage pen points, and I can't tell you how much money I spent on vintage pen points in my life. Just to get enough to want to use the one I like using, the Muslim Imperfection. That was a pen point I think at one point I had 10 full boxes of them, which would have lasted more than a lifetime. I wound up selling most of them or giving them away. But at the price I paid, that to me, it's ridiculous to people who are selling those points now. If you could find them on eBay for 30, 40, 50 bucks for one, what are you going to do with one, as I said before?
Darwin just posted that David Grimes is about to start a course on offhand flourishing.
Yeah.
Gentlepenmen.com.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think you've seen this the other night, Liz. I got this envelope in the mail from David Grimes. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
The bird flourish on there. I mean, he's just one of the best at it. He really is. And his method of teaching, my videos are pretty low resolution, because at the time I made them, I had to make sure they could be played on the internet. David had professional setup, and you guys, his production value on his course is just amazing. I forget what he charges for it, but if you get a chance to learn with him, you should definitely take advantage of it if you can afford to. I don't think it's
$95, I think.
It's
$95. Yes,
yeah.
starts on the 12th of this month.
Yeah, if you get a chance to study, and David is very. I think I participated on his recent graduation of his students. I gave a talk for that, but yeah, he's one of the best, if not the best, at that style of script. I know he's been working on ornamental as well, but the flourishing I have in front of me is just, even like the little insert, it's got stippling work on. I don't think it's how well you can see that, and I apologize trying to hold it up, but it's amazing. I'd like to base some of my monoline stuff on some of the designs he's got here, but this, you can tell when someone puts the work in. You can tell, the person understands the fundamentals, and they have skill. And so he's one of them. There's others too. There's Nina. There's a gal in the Philippines. Gail, who's a medical doctor. Just, they do amazing work. I don't want to keep making all long and forgetting somebody getting mad at me, but just amazing. Anybody interested in Spencerian ornamental penmanship, give a shout out to Michael Ward if you can. Michael is, but to achieve what he's achieved takes a lot more work than I had to put in, just because he's got true muscular movement. So it's like watching a ballerina dance. He writes, yeah. Is that it in the chat sections?
Hoping to see you here in Mexico.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
Maybe someday, yeah. I don't travel much lately. Usually would do it for work. But no. I walk around Mexico asking people, do you speak English? Do you speak, you know?
Yeah. Mhm.
There's an old joke. What do you call somebody who speaks two languages, bilingual? What do you call somebody who speaks one language, an American? And I fit that bill completely. I'm an Italian descent and I can't speak Italian. So
Okay, we are waiting for you.
I'd love to come down.
It's a beautiful country for sure.
Oh, absolutely. But Michael Sully, have you guys taken any classes with Michael Sully?
Yeah, me.
Yeah, Michael's been down.
Yeah, with Francis Miller.
Yes.
Yeah.
He started, he actually put up the first and only monument to Platt Roger Spencer in Ohio, Estubelo, Ohio. I was fortunate enough to get in on a donation to make that happen. And but really, penmanship owes him a great debt. What's ironic though is this is an analog form, right? We're handwriting and using hand instruments. But what's keeping it alive is this: electronics and computers. I mean, we couldn't do this. I mean, think of it. We're having a virtual meeting right now with people from, essentially around the world. Maybe not that dramatic, but I spoke to people in China. I think I mentioned it earlier. Not easily. They have their own form of Zoom, but even my friends now, Liz and I belong to a Zoom hangout for fountain pen aficionados that we meet like maybe once a month, maybe sometimes more often. But you'd never have done this. I don't want to say it's thanks to the pandemic. That was a bad thing. But we never would have done this a few years back. Maybe we would have at some point, but I really appreciate the chance to share with you my passion and knowledge, and I'm glad you guys came. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And we enjoy it.
Again, we could always set something up again. I probably would want to do a little more formalized, so I could come with stuff ready to present. It's so hard in this way because some of the stuff I wanted to show you I couldn't find, but I couldn't have thought about it before the thing started because I didn't know what I was going to speak about or get asked. Yeah, promote handwriting and pay it forward. All right, guys. I got an early morning dean's meeting tomorrow.
Okay, take a rest. Good night.
But thank you guys, and
Thank you so much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Legend.
Listen, well, I don't know about that. I'm still alive. Let's not move me to that part yet. But thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you
Good
very
night.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.